Okay, great. So thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Welcome to the AIDS 2018 orientation webinar. We're so glad you all could join us. This is Nana Khanna from the U.S. People Living with HIV Caucus and Positive Women's Network. We are recording this webinar, so we will make it available also for those who weren't able to join afterwards. We'll be putting it up online. So on today's webinar, we're basically going to be talking about what is happening at AIDSWatch. AIDSWatch is coming up next week. We're all really excited about it. It is AIDSWatch, as you may know, is an annual event where people living with HIV and our allies and accomplices and those who work in the field come together in Washington, D.C. to basically advocate for policy issues that are priorities for our community. And we're going to spend some time today talking about what those priorities are, what to expect when you come to AIDSWatch, especially if it's your first time, and also what might be a little different this year than in years past if it's not your first time. So AIDSWatch is sponsored, the major sponsor is the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation. There are lots of other sponsors that help to make AIDSWatch possible. And there are three sort of primary organizations that organize AIDSWatch together. And those are AIDS United, the Treatment Access Expansion Project, and the U.S. People Living with HIV Caucus. And you are going to have a chance to hear from each of them today. So just some logistical things really quickly. You can type any questions into the chat box. Also, later, you can also raise your hand if you want to ask a verbal question and we can unmute your line. But for now, the presenters are on unmuted lines and everybody else is on muted lines just to reduce background noise. But please don't be shy about typing any questions you may have into the chat box. So here's what we're going to be covering today. I'm going to introduce our presenters. We're going to talk about what AIDSWatch is. We're going to go over some logistics. We're going to discuss policy priorities for 2018. We're going to talk about how you can get ready for Hill visits to have maximum impact. And then we'll have time for discussions and Q&A at the end. But we will take questions throughout as well, if you have any or comments. So this is me. I'm the moderator for today. I'm also thrilled to introduce our presenters. So on behalf of the U.S. People Living with HIV Caucus, we have Barb Cardell and Marco Castro-Bojorquez, both of whom are with the U.S. People Living with HIV Caucus. Barb is based in Boulder, Colorado, has been living with HIV since 1991. She is an advocate for people living with HIV, for women's rights, for awareness on a local, state, and national level, and was instrumental in leading the modernization of Colorado's HIV criminal laws that affect people living with HIV. Marco is also an incredible organizer and human who is involved with the U.S. People Living with HIV Caucus. He was also involved in decriminalization of HIV in California as a lead organizer with the Coalition of Californians for HIV Reform. Marco also organizes a network of Latinx immigrants living with HIV called Venas Abiertas, and I encourage you to contact him if you're interested in learning more about that, and you'll hear from both Barb and Marco in just a little bit. We also have Drew from AIDS United Policy Department joining us, and Drew is a policy associate with AIDS United. He is an incredible person who produces a ton of useful and accessible policy analysis for our community, and has been working really hard to make AIDSWatch everything that it will be this year. So you'll also be hearing from him in a little bit. And then we have Phil Waters from the Treatment Access Expansion Project, which is part of the Harvard Law School Center for Health Law and Policy Innovation. And Phil is an attorney, and he's also an active member of the North Carolina State Bar, and is currently working at Treatment Access Expansion Project, which, if you don't know, has been a sort of a very long-term partner on AIDSWatch since the beginning. And the Treatment Access Expansion Project has also been instrumental in advocating for and protecting rights, human rights of people living with HIV, and especially healthcare access. So that is our fabulous team for today. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this next section over to one of our presenters. I think I'm turning this over to Drew.
All right, thanks, Nana, for the introduction, and welcome everyone to this webinar. We are only 6 days away from the 25th anniversary of AIDSWatch, and everyone here at AIDS United, and I'm sure at the Treatment Access Expansion Project and PWN and all of our sponsors are really excited to get this started. It is the largest annual constituent-based national HIV/AIDS advocacy event. Last year, we had an amazing 560 plus folks come down for the event, which was, I think, at least 200 more than we had previously. In this age of Trump, it is so important that we all get out and make our voices heard. And we're hoping to build on that last year's event with a great showing this year. As I mentioned before, this is the 25th anniversary of AIDSWatch. I believe it is either the 4th or 5th year that AIDS United has taken the lead behind AIDSWatch, but NAPWO did it for a number of years, and it has always been a great event and integral part of the HIV community. Our goal is to educate Congress about the important issues at stake for people living with HIV/AIDS in the United States. It will be this coming Monday and Tuesday. The first day, as we'll go into a bit later, the first day will be a conference / seminar where you'll hear from a number of speakers, learn about how best to share your message and lobby on behalf of yourself to members of Congress, and join in a number of affinity groups and sessions to help you hone your message. And the following day will be a lobby day on the Hill, starting with a rally. This year, we are happy to once again have the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation as our presenting sponsor. As they have in years past, Elizabeth Taylor's grandchildren will be present at the event, along with a number of other notable folks, including a few celebrities. Daniel Francesi and Zach Posen from Project Runway will both be at certain parts of the event this year. We also want to thank all of our wonderful sponsors, many of whom are on AIDS United's Public Policy Committee, but we also have a few new folks this year. I believe 340B Health and the Victory Institute among them are new sponsors. We want to thank them. Without sponsorship, it would never be able to get this event off the ground. As you mentioned earlier, AIDSWatch 2018 is a partnership between AIDS United, the U.S. People Living with HIV Caucus, and the Treatment Access Expansion Project. These three groups all work together to put this on every year. I'm sorry? AIDS United's mission is to end the AIDS epidemic in the United States through strategic grant making, capacity building, policy and advocacy, technical assistance, and formative research.
Great, thank you so much, Drew. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Phil to introduce Treatment Access Expansion Project.
All right, thanks, Nana. So the Treatment Access Expansion Project, we're committed to bringing together advocates, consumers, providers, and the government, of course, to improve the health of people living with HIV, hepatitis C, and other chronic health conditions. And we do this by advocating for the expansion of access to high quality and affordable healthcare, focusing on reducing health disparities, supporting community education, and of course, advocacy capacity that contributes to a more equitable individual and public health environment. And so with that, I think we're over to Barb.
Great, super, thank you so much, and thank you everybody for joining us today. This is Barb Cardell, and I am the Vice Chair of the U.S. People Living with HIV Caucus, And as it mentions on this slide, we are a group of coalitions, organizations, networks, and independent advocates who come together to amplify the voice of people living with HIV in the United States. We formed in January of 2011, and we work to have a diverse representation of people living across the United States, both geographically as well as groups that are most impacted by the HIV epidemic in the United States. And especially for AIDSWatch, we work to support voices of people who often are marginalized or underrepresented, and ensuring that they are able to join us at AIDSWatch and to feel supported. Next slide. Wonderful. There's still time to register for AIDSWatch. If you're joining us on this call and have not yet registered, but this sounds like something that you feel is exciting and empowering in your advocacy, you can go ahead and register. It is $60, and it is 2 packed days of advocacy. So especially as this is our 25th anniversary, if you have been in past years and are thinking perhaps that you're ready to join us again, please register, come back. We need to ensure, especially in today's times, as previously mentioned, that we have as many voices as possible representing as many groups impacted by so much of what is happening in Washington, D.C. and impacting our lives across the United States. So please, if you haven't registered, go ahead and register. It is important that if you're planning on attending, that you have registered yourself so that we can go ahead and plan Hill visits, as will be mentioned later, and can ensure that there's an opportunity for you to speak with your elected representatives, and also can be in partnership with other people from your state. Next slide. So this year we're going to be at the Washington Marriott Wardman Park, and that is on Woodley Road, and it is a beautiful hotel, and it is in Columbia Heights. It is close to the zoo, as well as a number of other wonderful places that probably we will be too busy to go to, but it is also very centrally located and close to a metro line. So for those of you who are wondering how you can get there, further on we'll be talking about metros, and that will be easy to access. Next slide. We like to give everybody a heads up that you will need to provide a credit card when you check in. It can be a credit or a debit card, but it is for incidental expenses, even if you have received a scholarship. If this is going to be a problem, I believe you can go ahead and contact Drew and talk to him about it. The credit card will not be charged unless you charge expenses to your room, and so that is at the restaurant or room service or pay-per-view movies, but you will need it to go ahead and check in on Sunday afternoon when you are joining us. Next slide. Getting there. Washington, D.C. It is a actually easy place to get around. You'll be flying into either Reagan National Airport, DCA, which is about 20 minutes from the hotel, Dulles, which is about 45 minutes from the hotel, or Baltimore Washington International Airport, or BWI, which is about an hour from the hotel. All of these are located on either bus or metro lines, and there is also other public transportation. Next slide. That people are able to use. This hotel does not provide shuttle service, so you can either contract with the Super Shuttle. I would recommend you make those reservations before you leave home, or the Washington Metro, that's ground transportation, which is buses to then metros. There is ground transportation from BWI as well. And if you want an overarching map of all of DC and how to get to the Hill, as well as the hotel, or anywhere else interesting in DC, the metro is really very convenient, and that is that last link. And once we are done, we'll go ahead and put that link in the chat box as well, so that people can go ahead and use that. But it is good to kind of take a look at those before you actually end up coming to Washington, D.C. Sorry, Nana, next slide. And packing list. We always like to just remind people that you might be sharing a room. If you have a scholarship, You will definitely be sharing a room. And it is good to bring pajamas just to be a friendly roommate who's not going to be, yes, indeed, showing a little bit more of yourself than you perhaps want to in your advocacy role. So pajamas are a good idea. Bring something red to wear or an accent for Tuesday's group photo. And it also is wonderful to be able to see people with red walking through the halls of Congress and easily identify those who are there for AIDSWatch, because we tend to take over most of the buildings, and it is a powerful statement, not just to us, but also to the people that we're visiting. Make sure you pack enough meds for your trip, plus an extra day. Occasionally weather happens, travel mishaps happen, and you might be on the road a little bit longer than you expected, and so pack an extra day of medication just to be safe. And make sure you bring toiletries. We recommend people bring 1 or 2 nice outfits for the Hill visits on Monday and Tuesday, just to, be able to feel like you're putting your best advocacy foot forward. It doesn't have to be a power suit, but it can be something nice that you would wear when you are talking, or that you will wear when you are talking to your elected officials and representing people living with HIV and in the United States. Comfortable walking shoes are a must. If you are best able to walk around in sneakers, pack a pair of dress shoes. We are going to buildings that are spread out and you spend a lot of time standing, and we don't want to derail our advocacy because our feet are hurting. So bring comfortable shoes because there is walking. Bring an umbrella. I always forget to bring an umbrella, and so I now have 18 Washington, D.C. umbrellas because I have to purchase one. Otherwise, I end up getting wet, and that is uncomfortable to have to sit there and do an advocacy visit when you are damp. And finally, bring a warm jacket. The weather, and next slide, please, is going to be a little bit cold. There's going to be some snow and some rain, and so pack a warm jacket because we want to ensure that everybody is as warm and toasty as possible, and that would be probably a good idea to bring scarves and gloves looking at this as well. But whatever you need to be able to deal with this is great. And with that, I will turn it over to, I believe, Drew.
All right, thank you for that. Taking a look at the agenda here, on Sunday afternoon into the early evening, we will have early registration. Last year, I believe, was the first year doing that, and it was very successful. And if you want to just get in quick and out quick, that is the time to do it. Don't wait until Monday morning to get everything settled. You can get your shirt and bag and schedule and everything like that on Sunday. Monday morning, we start off with breakfast at 7:30, where check-in will begin for those who didn't register, get all their stuff on Sunday, or those who are registering on site. Just as we had questions about this last year, we will be asking that they keep the breakfast and coffee and everything out longer. I think the Marriott took out the breakfast after about an hour last year, and some folks didn't get a chance to eat. We will do our best to make sure that they keep it out well into the morning. From 8:30 to 11:45, we will be having a training along with a number of different panels. Among them will be a panel of elected officials living with HIV, who will share their experience on that, as well as a community mobilization panel, and a number of other speakers, and also some training from M.A. Kiefer from Barbara Lee's office on how to conduct yourself during a meeting in the House or the Senate and how to get your message best heard. Over lunch from 11:45 to 1:15, you will gather with your respective states, and if you are not a state coordinator, you will be sort of going over what the plan is for Tuesday in terms of which meetings you're going to be hitting and what you want to talk about. We are trying to make it this year so that each group is around anywhere from 4 to 7 people, enough to feel comfortable, not feel like you're on your own, but hopefully not too many that everyone gets a chance to speak some during their meetings. From 1:20 to 4:45, we will have a number of hosted meetings and networking sessions. It'll be very similar to what we did last year. And we have a number of great presenters this year that we are really looking forward to. Hopefully, folks can find things that meet their needs and their interests during the afternoon period. If you have any further questions about that, you can always email myself or anyone at AIDS United, and we can help you get a more complete overview of what those meetings and networking sessions will be. At 5:30, we will have the Positive Leadership Award reception. This year, it will not be in Congress. It will be at the Mary Warren Park, which hopefully will allow more people to get down to the ceremony. On Tuesday, we have a rally from 8:45 to 9. That is in the West Capitol Area 1, which I'll show you in a second. But last year was also the first time doing the rally for us, and we thought it was a huge success and a lot of fun. And like was mentioned earlier, the weather forecast does not look fantastic for Tuesday. So please bring jackets, bring rain gear, bring an umbrella, because we want to see as many of you out there as possible. We have some great speakers lined up, and it's going to be a great way to get pumped up before we go into our meetings, which will take place from 9 to 5 p.m. There will be Hill guides and state coordinators there to help out folks in terms of getting from one meeting to the next. And here you can see the top-down view of the Capitol. That little space down at the bottom that says 1, that is where we will be meeting for our rally in the morning. It's close to where we had it last year, only much nearer to the Capitol. It's the west side. There's a big fountain right down there in the sort of gold, hard to miss. And hopefully we can fill up that whole area and get a great crowd going. Next slide.
Great. Thank you so much, Drew. So I'm going to just pause for a second. We've had a couple of logistical questions come up in the chat box that I thought maybe we could address before we move on to MIPA and the policy briefs. So the first one is for folks who are putting down a card at check-in, is the hotel going to be placing a hold on that card? And do we know what the amount is, if that's happening? Drew, is that something you know?
That is not something I know off the top of my head. I can check in with our partners over at Meeting Masters and try and get an answer to that. I do not know if the hold is going to be placed in, but we can send out an email afterwards to folks who need it. Okay,
that would be great. Thank you. And I think just as much detail as possible about whether that's like per night, a per night amount, or if it's per room would be helpful.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. And then the second question is, do folks need to register for the Positive Leadership Awards reception, or can they just show up?
People do not need to register for the Positive Leadership Awards reception. In past years, when we've had it in Congress, we asked that folks register, in large parts because of the size limits of the room. But it being at the hotel this year, we will not require anyone to register. But if more than, say, 200, 250, or 300 people show up, we might run out of food. But that's the only downside.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So if you're hungry, get there early. Be on time. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Any other questions on logistics before we move on to the next sections of this webinar? Some folks are putting interesting comments and helpful resources in the chat box. So I just want to point everybody to that. Barb has posted the link to the DC Metro, so you can check schedules to get around. Also has posted the information about where on the AIDS United website you can get info on AIDSWatch. and links to the other partners' websites. And then finally, Lee did chime in with some advice on the hold that may be placed on credit cards. So his suggestion is that it might be like $75, but I know it can be different depending on your card and whether you use credit or debit. So that's something that we can definitely follow up on. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this next section over to Marco, who is going to be talking to us about meaningful involvement of people living with HIV.
Can you hear me?
Yes, but you're kind of quiet. Can you move closer to your mic?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Your volume is still really low.
Yeah.
Could
No,
you?
Can you hear me now?
Basically, if you could just try to speak up, I think that will be helpful.
Okay. Hold on one second. Can you? Naina, can you hear me?
Yes, that's better.
Is
Thanks.
it better?
Yep. Great.
Okay. Sorry, folks, I'm in the middle of. No, I'm in a beautiful place actually in the Sierra. I was gonna say something like in the middle of nowhere, but so thank you all for being at this webinar and also for planning on coming to DC with this great celebrating 25 years of AIDSWatch. I think that one of the most important things that in my experience is with AIDSWatch was going to the visits to the Hill, but also something that is really important is to talk about the importance of people living with HIV, basically participating and making decisions at all levels in regards to anything that has to do with HIV. And so AIDSWatch is one of those settings where actually people that are living with HIV have access to settings and they have a place in the table, so to speak. Next slide, please. These principles or ideas that came about from the Denver principles back in the day is to ensure that the people that live with HIV, their voices are heard, and that we recognize that we are not a monolithic community, that we are diverse, and that you all need to be prepared to speak up. The communities that are most impacted by HIV are the least, the ones that have the least resources, and often the ones that are silenced. So if you go to the Hill and if you are someone who's living with HIV, make sure that you speak powerfully. Also, we wanted to highlight youth, immigrants, people that are transgender, people of color, and also new participants, women. Those are groups that that should all be uplifted during the conference, and that we should all also respect and embrace the principles of intersectionality, and make sure that you are check your privilege and that you are aware of the dynamics. I wish you all the best this in just a few days, and I think that it's going to be a great gathering. So I think that Drew, is it Drew or Phil is next?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Marco. I think these points that you're making are super important, and we are aware that there are many times where Hill visits happen. There's like, you know, time pressure sometimes, and sometimes it ends up that people who already have a lot of experience doing Hill visits are the ones who are speaking the most. We really want to encourage you all to work with your state coordinators who you're going to meet on Monday to to think about how, with the folks that you're going to be doing visits with, whose voices really could be uplifted, who could be supported to speak more during the visits, and how can some new voices be in the mix. So I really appreciate you, Marco, for making those points. Thank you. So I think, next we have Drew, who's going to talk a little bit more about what the legislator visits are going to look like and how they're getting scheduled, how you're going to find out when your visits are, and what happens there.
Okay, thanks for that, Nana and Marco. Just a heads up before I go into everything that's listed on the slide here. For those who don't know, there's about a 90 to 95% chance that members of Congress will not be on the Hill this upcoming week. We schedule AIDSWatch out with the hotel about a year in advance, and it's always a bit of a balancing act between trying to anticipate when Congress is going to be in and when it's going to be warm enough for us to have the event and not risk getting snowed out, which has happened in the past. This year, as it turns out, Congress is on a recess, on the Easter recess when we are in town, but that does not mean that their staff isn't going to be there. So the majority of meetings this week, this upcoming AIDSWatch, will be with staff members of Congress. Although there is a slight chance that since Congress seems to be having continual problems getting its act together and passing a budget, that they might either be shut down or still around trying to get that figured out when we're here on Monday and Tuesday. So it's still very much in the air, an exciting time here in Washington, and hopefully y'all be right in the center of that. All of the meetings have been scheduled by Soapbox Consulting. We've worked with them before. I think they were actually worked on the very first ever AIDSWatch. So they've been doing this a long time. You are not responsible for scheduling any meetings with your legislators. On Thursday, you will be getting an email from Soapbox with an individualized code that you can go to Soapbox's website and just put in the code and see your schedule. All of the meetings will not be finished by Thursday. It's still a lot of moving parts, and we're always trying to get meetings penciled in all the way up until Tuesday. But you'll get a fairly good idea of what your meetings will look like on that Thursday. It will not include which teams you're a part of and who you'll be meeting with. You will find that out on Monday. Your state coordinators will get those lists of teams, and if you don't have a state coordinator in your state, someone from either Soapbox or AIDS United will be there to help you out. Like I mentioned earlier, it's our goal to have groups of between 3 or 4 and 7 going to the meetings, and we hope to get everyone at least 4 meetings on the Hill Day. That is our goal. But that Monday period, like Nana mentioned, is really important in terms of talking with your group members, your state members, and figuring out who is going to speak when. Because for a lot of folks, if you're new, if you don't sort of verbalize that you want to speak there on Monday, a lot of times folks have a tendency to sort of clam up when they actually get to the meeting. So the more you can let it be known that you would like to speak early on, the better a chance that you will have that platform on the day. You're expected to attend all the meetings you're scheduled for. Of course, if for one reason or another you are unable to make it to a meeting, do not push yourself. These meetings are for you, and if it's just not in the cards and you're not able to make it, that's fine. But we encourage you to make all of your meetings. And as was mentioned in the comments, the congressional staffers are really the most important people we want to talk to. They're the ones that deal with the policy issues day in and day out, and they're the ones that basically convince their bosses what to do. There's a running joke that in DC, the Congress is run by a bunch of 23-year-olds, and to a large extent, it's true. So if you speak with a staffer who looks like they're about 23 or 24, they probably still control a lot of what's going on in that office. So just know that your voice is being heard.
That's so great.
I think that's all I got.
Yeah, thank you so much. We did have a few additional logistical questions come in. I'm going to just go ahead and see if we can handle those real quick before we go into policy briefs. Is that okay?
Not
Cool.
a problem.
Okay, so one question is there parking if folks are staying somewhere else off-site but driving to the to AIDSWatch? Is there parking at the hotel?
There is parking at the hotel. It is, I believe, $40 or $45 a night. If you are an AIDSWatch scholar and you're driving, so if you've received your travel and your hotel through the AIDSWatch Scholarship Program, we will cover the parking. If not, there are other options in terms of long-term parking that are probably cheaper than the hotel itself if you don't mind walking. I know for a fact that the parking at Union Station, if you're driving down, is much cheaper overnight than it is at the hotel. You would just take the red line then straight from Union Station to Woodley Park. So, I mean, that's some limited info about parking. I'm sure you could find out more if you really dug on the internet, but I would recommend if cost isn't an issue, if your organization is paying for it, then by all means, stay at the hotel and their parking. Otherwise, I think Union Station's a good bet.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, and I would, the hotel site is just a few blocks from the Woodley Park Metro. So if you can Metro there, I think that's a really good option. Great, and then second question, there's a question about a scholarship. Somebody who's receiving a partial scholarship asking for assistance for hotel and travel. I'm assuming that at this point, Drew, the scholarship process is basically closed, so there's no additional assistance available. Is that correct?
That is correct. I'm not aware of us giving out any partial scholarships. If individuals have questions about that, my email is at the final slide of this this presentation, along with my phone number. Feel free to reach out to me and we could try to work something out and see what's going on. But all of these scholars have been made aware of their scholarships, and that is baked in at this point.
Okay, great, thank you. And then there was one more question about for scholarship recipients who are sharing rooms, will both of their credit cards be taken by the hotel, or will it just be the first person who checks in?
That is an excellent question that I do not have an answer for. I will ask and find that out along with the question about the hold charges. But no, I hadn't thought of that. That's a good question.
Great, thank you. Okay, great. So any other logistical questions? Yeah, Alicia is saying here in the chat box, it's normally the first person who checks in. That's usually how it works.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then somebody's asking about how will the hotel know which roommate is using something like pay-per-view. The truth is they won't. So that is, we'll get back to you to confirm on the credit card, whether both credit cards will be taken or just one by the desk. But that is something that you may be able to also ask the hotel to turn off incidentals for your room. Drew, do you know if that's possible?
I do not know if that's possible. I would say that if you are a scholar and you want to order a movie in or raid the hotel room refrigerator, you're on your own. We do not cover any sort of food or extra movie fees. But hey, if you want to, go for it.
Well, I think the question is more there'll be two roommates. If one person's credit card is on hold, but the other person is like incurring these expenses, how do they sort of like, what's their process around holding each other accountable or dealing with that? So if you could just check on whether incidentals can be turned off so that roommates don't have to get into that situation if just one card is being taken, that might be helpful.
I will look into that.
Cool, thank you. Okay, great. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into the policy briefs, which is sort of the heart of AIDSWatch. And Phil is going to walk us through these.
Thanks. So we're going to talk now about what you're going to discuss in these Hill meetings with either staffers or potentially even members. So this year we've organized the policy priorities into 4 main categories: civil rights, access to care, sexuality education, and of course the budget. Each of these priorities has its own brief to discuss why the issue is important, how recent developments in that area stand to affect people living with HIV. And each of these priorities have also been translated into specific talking points and legislative asks, because while it's of course important to educate members of Congress and their staff about these issues, we want and need concrete action to come of this. Next slide. So you can find the policy briefs online in English and in Spanish at the link right here. I've also just put that link in the chat box if you want to take a look now. You'll get a hard copy of these briefs at the conference as well, so no need to print that in advance. On Monday, there will be a specific panel with 4 advocates who helped author these briefs. And that panel is going to review the key points of each area and the legislative asks we want to bring into our meetings. We're going to talk a brief overview about what each of the policy priorities, but you'll get more information on Monday. And it's going to be important to understand these asks, as they're going to help us hold legislators accountable throughout the year. And then one final note is that besides the full 4 policy priorities, you're going to get a summary of all the asks, some talking points for AIDSWatch, and then a special brief that's an overview of the 25th anniversary and a bit of a celebration there. Next slide. So going into each of the briefs, the first one's about civil rights. So this brief, just generally speaking, speaks about the need to protect the rights of all people living with HIV. So all racial and ethnic population groups, all members of the transgender community, the LGBTQ+ community, all immigrants, and all people living with disabilities. We're also trying with this brief to educate members of Congress and their staff specifically about how systemic inequities exacerbate health disparities, including those seen within the HIV community. And then just generally the overarching theme of this brief is that, unfortunately, we still have to ask and talk about that we need Congress to protect our civil rights and treat us equally under the law. Next slide. Under the access to care brief, here we're really trying to make sure that people living with and at risk for HIV can access comprehensive care and services to keep them healthy. And so some of the main things that are in this brief are protecting the gains that we have made under the Affordable Care Act. So that's things like Medicaid expansion and all the great things that it has done to bring healthcare to this community. And very specifically, given the climate that we were in 2017 and even still in 2018, we're asking members specifically to reject any agenda to repeal the Affordable Care Act without a high-quality alternative in place. Specific to Medicaid, we're asking for protecting Medicaid's funding and structure. So again, because of the current climate, that means we're asking folks to reject attempts to cap funding for the Medicaid program, or introduce work requirements for the Medicaid program, or any other restrictive eligibility requirements. We're also asking folks to pass legislation to stabilize the private insurance market for those that get their insurance that way. And then, of course, this is also in the budget ask, but we're asking for continued funding for the Wine Right program. Next slide. On the sexuality brief, we're asking for some pretty specific things here. So we're asking members to protect the integrity of the Office of Adolescent Health Teen Prevention Pregnancy Preventive Program, and the CDC's Division of Adolescent and School Health. We're asking for continued authorization and funding for the Personal Responsibility Education Program aimed at teen vulnerable youth and teen populations. We're asking for elimination of funding for abstinence until marriage only programs. So the personal responsibility education program does include information about abstinence, but also about safe sex. And so, we're trying to do away with the abstinence only programs. And then if possible, we're asking members to co-sponsor the Real Education for Healthy Youth Acts and the Youth Access to Sexual Health Services Act. Next slide. And then finally, of course, the budget. We always need money for our programs. So we saw in the 2018 appropriation bill essentially maintained level funding for HIV prevention and treatment programs, but as I'm sure many of you know, this still falls short of the vital funding that's needed for our programs. In particular, we're focusing on asking for increased funding for HOPWA, that's Housing Opportunities for People Living with AIDS program, and the Secretary's Minority AIDS Initiative Fund. And then finally, with respect to the budget, we're really trying to push members to reject these sort of ideological riders that attempt to block access to key providers like Planned Parenthood or comprehensive services for people who use drugs, such as syringe services programs. Next slide. And so finally, just a few tips on talking to legislators or those staffers that we talked about. I'm not going to take these in any particular order, but I think one of the most important things that is always emphasized at AIDSWatch is to try and make it personal and speak very powerfully with that personal story in your voice. Why this specific issue affects you as a person living with their district, as a person living with HIV or at risk or an ally. Those personal stories are really what is going to stick with those folks in the meeting. You can throw facts and numbers at them, but it's very hard to forget someone's personal story. It's a good idea to introduce your delegation. Tell them that if you live in their district, that's always good to know. It helps to come with your zip code handy in case they often ask that, what's your zip code, so that they can record that and then know that actually the constituent was in their meeting, and they tend to listen a little bit more if you're actually in their district. In terms of follow-up, it helps if you get their contact information. The staffers will often hand you a business card or something like that. It helps if you have time to just write a quick thank you note, say, thanks for meeting with us, maybe give a couple lines about what you discussed, say thank you, and then offer to follow up. Sometimes they have extra information that they need. Something's coming up on a bill and they need somebody's personal story, or they need somebody that has more information, and you could be that person if you took the time to follow up with them. Going to jump around here. One of the things that I think is really important is that, as we mentioned before, it's really helpful to educate members of Congress and their staff about these issues, but we really do need to have some hard asks here, something specific that you want them to do, or something that you want them to not do in the case of some of these, and really wait for their response. When you give them that hard ask, don't sort of let them off the hook. Make them own what their answer is, and make them be very specific about what that is. Of course, you don't have to. It helps if you have business cards. If cost is an issue, I think Vistaprint is still doing $250 free for first-time use. We encourage folks to, we have all these policy briefs and talking points and asks laid out for you, but you're not going to have enough time to get through every single thing. And so we recommend that you start by talking about a couple subjects, and then see what their feeling is, ask if they want you to continue, or fill them in with any questions like that. It's just sort of a way to guide the meeting and make sure that they're actually listening to what you're saying. If you're arriving, you should probably plan on arriving at least 30 minutes early. Sometimes there is security to get into all of the Senate and House office buildings, and so you're going to need sometimes up to 30 minutes to get through those lines. And it definitely doesn't look super great if you're walking in late to the meeting. Two other things I want to mention just real quick is the first thing is to be focused. So we are here at AIDSWatch, so make sure you're talking about these issues and don't sort of get derailed. I know there's a lot of things that you may want to say to them, but try and be focused. And then final note is that this isn't up here on the slide, but I just want to sort of reiterate what Marco and Naina were talking about is make sure you're making space for folks where space needs to be made. So if you're a veteran of AIDSWatch, or if there's somebody who's who's new or who's very timid. Make sure you're not the one dominating the conversation throughout the entire meeting. If you're someone who's been there a couple times, or maybe you talked in the last meeting and someone's been silent, consider being the person who sort of introduces everybody and just kind of gives everybody else space to speak. So really think critically about who you can be uplifting throughout the process and who you can be making space for in those meetings. So that's all I have, and I think we're gonna move to questions now.
Yes, thank you so much. So folks can, if you want to ask your question verbally, you can raise your hand in the chat box and I'll promote you to a presenter where you could be unmuted. We did have one additional logistical question come in on the chat. So for participants who have limited mobility, and are going to be attending AIDSWatch, there's quite a bit of moving around. Do you have any recommendations about accessibility for folks? Or is there any way that could be taken into account when planning sort of like timings of meetings to allow for more time in between them?
Absolutely. In terms of mobility, everything that we have scheduled does have wheelchair access, whether it's the hotel, Congress, or access to the metro system. However, we do have, I need to find them again. It can send it out to anyone who needs this information. We do have a number of, I think 2 or 3 different services in terms of motorized scooters that could assist folks. I don't know the logistics of around pricing for that. If the person is a scholar, we should certainly be able to take care of it. If not, I think it's just worth getting that conversation started to see what we can do. But I can definitely send that information around to anyone who needs it.
Great, thank you, Drew. So can folks contact you directly about that?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Great. So, and the contact info for all presenters is on the final slide. So we'll get that to you in just a second. Lee, you also had a question or comment. Are you able to unmute yourself? I did promote you to presenter.
Yes, I am.
Great.
Hi, everybody. Phil, what did you say about syringe services? Because I just really, can you give me an idea of how much of talking points and fact sheets will cover syringe services? Because it's getting a little scary as far as ODs and these spikes in Hep C and HIV around the country. And then with Big Pharma set to make billions more off of our friends and off of people we care for, and just show it off as research and development for the new formulations, new drugs, injectables, implantables, because it's really starting to scare me. I really hope there is enough emphasis on syringe access, because it's making absolutely no sense to save people's lives today, right now, right here, with Narcan, and then let them possibly die from HIV or Hep C 20 years down the road. So that's my mega concern. So thank you.
All right, thanks for that concern, Lee. We are currently right now working on a separate sort of smaller batch of talking points for a number of different issues, one of which is syringe access. So we will be printing out, I believe, probably around 20 or 25 of those. We could do more if there's more demand for folks, and passing them out on Monday for individuals who basically show any interest in talking specifically about syringe access with congressional offices. So that will be there. It won't be glossy like the other policy briefs, but the talking points will be there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much. Any other questions? I'll give folks a couple of minutes to either type them into the chat box or raise your hand to be unmuted.
Who took all these wonderful pictures?
Marco, where did all these beautiful pictures come from? Marco did the design of this slide deck.
They come from all of us. We created a bunch of albums, and so I stole from everybody.
Awesome. They're
One
gorgeous.
thing I forgot to mention in tips to talking to legislators is if they're up for it, ask if they'll take a photo with you, and if you can tweet it out or put it on Facebook. Sometimes they see it as a really easy PR win.
Yep, that's great. And I think the AIDSWatch staff will probably also be, would love to have those photos as well to, the AIDS United comms team to include in, in materials following up.
Speaking for the AIDS United comm team, I could say that is a definite. Any and all photos are welcome.
Great. Thank you.
Nana, there is a question.
Yep, I got it. So there's a question about getting a copy of the PowerPoint. Yes, absolutely. We're going to be posting this recording, which will include the PowerPoint on the PWN website after this. And I will put the link to that website in the chat box here. It'll be posted later today. We can also email it out to anyone who registered for the webinar. Great. Any other questions? If there are no other questions, I want to invite any of our panelists to give closing comments. So why don't we go ahead and start with Drew?
All right. Thanks, everyone. I think this has been a wonderful webinar. I guess my closing comments would just be that feel free to reach out to me and other AIDS United staff. You have my contact information at the end of this slide deck. We really just want to make this the biggest and best AIDSWatch for its 25th anniversary. We do not worry, whenever people have issues with AIDSWatch, we are listening. We are always listening to what your concerns are, and we're trying to make this better and more in line with what the community wants from this event. So again, thank everyone for showing up at the webinar, and we really look forward to seeing you at AIDSWatch this year.
Great. Thank you so much. Phil?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, thank you to you, AU, and Marco and Barb for being co-presenters, and special thanks to Marco for putting the slide deck together, making it look so wonderful. Just a piece of advice is make sure you have fun while you're at AIDSWatch as well. I know we're there to do some very serious things, but it's also can be a very, very fun event, and try not to take yourself too seriously.
Great. Thank you so much. Marco?
I also want to thank my co-presenters and you, Nina, for moderating, the participants. Lee, you really resonated with me what you mentioned about syringes and people that inject drugs. So I want to send all my energy, and I hope that you speak with people, that you talk to folks around. And that's the thing that I will say to everybody. I have met the most incredible folks, friends, mentors, colleagues at this conference, and so don't waste time, because it's really packed, and sometimes you get sick. I've gotten sick, but try to reach out to people that are not like you, that they don't sound and look like you, and engage. You will have the opportunity, and there is the possibility for you to make a very good friend, and someone that is going to be your ally and your colleague, especially someone who is living with HIV. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And Barb?
Yeah, thank you. I just appreciate being asked to participate in this call. I get very excited about AIDSWatch and the opportunity for us to bring all of our divergent voices to Washington, D.C. to educate our elected officials or their staffers who are making their policy. And so I want to thank everybody who is on the webinar for taking time out of their lives to come and to participate in this really important event. It's gone on for 25 years, and it's going to be very exciting to see everyone there and to celebrate the resilience of our community and the power of our advocacy. And so thank you all for coming and joining us.
Great. Well, thank you again so much to all of our presenters and to all of you for your advocacy and your commitment every single day to elevate these issues. And we look forward to seeing you in DC on Sunday or Monday. Safe travels, everyone. Please do be in touch with any questions. You have all of our contact information here. And we look forward to seeing you Monday morning, if not sooner. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.